Welcome to the Protagonist Pub. My name is Tammy, and this is where characters gather. It's Monday, and so it's time for my What Did I Read Last Week wrap up. Let's start with Kindle. And I apologize in advance. The girls just got bones, and they're a little happy and excited about that. So if you hear clattering in the background, it's my happy puppies. First up is Peter Ward's first in the Time Rep series called Time Rep. I read this on my Kindle. It was available on Kindle Unlimited. It follows a young man who's 27, lives in London, is just your typical slovenly nerd who surprisingly does not live in his parents' basement, but does live with his roommate, Tim, and I cannot remember the protagonist's name. I am very sorry. It is completely skipping my brain. And he has been chosen by a supercomputer in the future to be a holiday time rep for the travel agency. And the reason he's chosen is because he plays no impact on history whatsoever as determined by the supercomputer in the future. He eventually accepts the job, travels to the future, learns about the seagull that look left, doesn't really understand what that means, no one really knows either, so it's kind of glossed over. He travels as part of his training, he travels to the Great Fire of London in 1666 and is shot at. Someone tries to kill him. And it's not part of the Great Fire of 1666. It's someone actively trying to kill him. He escapes, goes back to the future, and suddenly everybody's like, why is somebody trying to kill you? So what ensues from there is an attempt to figure out why he was chosen. Is he truly insignificant? Who's trying to kill him? And does he play a role in the past, or is he playing a role in the future? This is the first in a trilogy of books, all available on Kindle Unlimited. The next two are on my Kindle right now. It is a good, solid 3.5, 4-star read for me. I read Peter Ward's The Electric Detective on the last day of... I love The Electric Detective. I read it in one day. It was an easy 5-star read for me. It was my introduction to the subgenre of detective sci-fi, and I cannot wait to read more. Time Rep wasn't quite as compelling a read for me. It was still very good. I still stayed up very late finishing it. And I will read the next two in the series. It had some first book flaws. It was more world building, less character development, and less storytelling, more here's my world, here's what the characters are going to be, dealing with in said world, than it was character growth arc. So it was a good solid 3.5, 4 stars for me. I enjoyed it. Next up on my Kindle was Up to No Good by Linda Riley. I was sent book 3 by the publisher last week, which publishes at the end of the month. So I went ahead and bought the first two in the series on my Kindle. It is a grilled cheese mystery, and Up to No Good is the first. It is set in a small town in southwestern Vermont. And Carly is the protagonist. And she runs a grilled cheese diner in said small town. I admit that when I ran across this book on, just skimming through cozies on the library site and Amazon and Barnes & Noble and my bookstore or whatever, I actively decided to skip this one. On its face, it has too many of the cozy tropes authors are currently stuck in. Small town business owner runs across a dead body, neglects her business, solves said crime. I'm well over that. And a grilled cheese diner just didn't seem like a viable business, let alone one set in a small town. However, I was pleasantly surprised. It is a smaller diner, so it's it's not so large that it would need in excess of 100 customers a day to remain even remotely close to profitable. Carly doesn't neglect her business throughout the course of the book. The diner is new. She's constantly worried about it succeeding and what happens if her lease isn't renewed. And so I greatly appreciated the fact that the business wasn't secondary, but at the same time, business concerns didn't dominate the entire book. I greatly appreciated that. She doesn't stumble across a dead body in the first couple of chapters. It probably doesn't happen until chapter 5 or chapter 6, which, again, I greatly appreciated. And she doesn't set out to solve the mystery so much as she sets out to save her business, which I appreciated. She does land herself in a lot of hot water. She is saved at the very last minute, which is okay. I'm fine with that. This was a well-plotted mystery that showed the reader the clues. But at the same time, it didn't. The clues pointing to the eventual villain were very subtle. And I was surprised at the end, which is unusual for me. And I'm okay with that, actually. This was probably a good high 3.5, 4 stars for me. I then picked up book number 2 in the series on my Kindle. Picture here. It is No Parm, No Foul by Linda Riley. And in this one, Carly is entering a Halloween competition in town for food, and the local residents get to vote on who wins. There's some shenanigans at the ballot box, no winners declared, and you are not at all surprised at who ends up dead. And this one was a little more predictable, unfortunately. Carly is much more set in book 2 on pursuing the mystery and solving the crime than she is growing her business and maintaining it. And it is understandable from the point of view of how the book is written, because her romantic love interest, and the romance is very mild, and it's nothing that truly occurs on the page. There's some, but it's by no means a romantic cozy mystery. So her romantic interest is suspected of the crime. So obviously she wants to clear his name. But it felt forced. There is there is some poetry in this book that are clues which are well done, but I think would have been better placed in the first book for some odd reason. Probably because the first one the title of this book doesn't make a lot of sense to me. It rhymes nicely. It goes off the old saying, no harm, no foul, no harm, no foul. Makes sense. However, the only time Parmesan is mentioned in the book is when Carly's mom brings over spaghetti for dinner one night. Other than that, there is no mention of Parmesan. It was more a play on words to make the title work in the cheese world than it was a relation to the mystery. So that was disappointing, but overall the book was decent. It's a solid 3.5 for me. This one didn't sit as well with me, for lack of a better description. It didn't sit as well for me. And that's okay. Happens sometimes. Next up, next are my library books. I read To Scotland with Love by Patricia Griffin. It was an audiobook from Library for Me. This is a first in the series of Knits and Kilts. It is a romance. It's not a steamy romance. It's not a clean romance. I'll get to that in a minute. I can't remember her name either. What the heck? I will put her name right here. Moves back to Scotland after her husband dies, who she was in the process of divorcing. And moves back to her hometown where her grandmother still lives. And she runs into... Hi, Felicity. You coming to say hi? Okay. Lay down, big girl. She runs into Mr. Darcy. He is the current most popular actor of Mr. Darcy from Pride and Prejudice. And he has gone missing in the world of Hollywood stardom. She's looking to restart her career. She thinks, hey, I can tell the world where he is. Thus begins the book. What the book turns into is her falling back in love with her hometown and the people in it, including reconnecting with her grandmother and falling in love with Mr. Darcy. So we get to the classification of the book. It's clearly a romance. It's a character-driven story based on two people falling in love. And here's where the problems begin. There is some faith in the book, not enough that you would classify it as a Christian romance. It is set in over a long period of time, but Christmas in particular. They do take the Lord's name in vain around Christmas time in the book. So it's not going to be classified as clean romance. It's not going to be classified as Christian romance. There are some sex scenes in the book. They're not explicit enough to be an explicit romance. They're not steamy enough to be a steamy romance. They're just enough. This is what I think happened. The editor said, clean romances don't sell. Christian romances don't sell. Sex sells. Put some sex in your book. And the author said, okay. Insert obligatory sex scenes. They weren't poorly done, but they served no purpose. They were gratuitous. They were there to have a sex scene in the book. They didn't advance the story. They didn't make characters fall in love. They were there to have sex scenes in the book. Again, it's the whole sex sells belief, and it didn't work. It detracted from the overall enjoyment of the book. Eventually, the characters admit that, yes, they love one another, and it turns into a happily ever after. The book did make me cry at one point. There is a death in the book. And that was very well handled. It was enjoyable, but it wasn't... This book was frustrating more than anything else. This book was frustrating. It could have been a clean, well-written romance, and instead we have gratuitous sex scenes that just don't advance the story. They don't serve any function. So I have book 2 in my previous library haul. I don't know that I'm going to read it. I don't know that I'm invested enough in the series to read any more of it, to be honest. So it's a middle of the road 3. It was a good mindless listen as I did stuff around the house. But other than that, I don't think I'm overly invested. Next up was Her Royal Spyness by Rhys Bowen. It is the first in the Her Royal Spyness series. It is set in 1930s London. Georgie, Lady Georgina, is the protagonist. She is the sister of a duke, Scottish duke. Goes to London because her brother stops paying her allowance, and so she's got to make her own way in the world before she's married off by the royal family and has no say in her life anymore. I know everybody loves this series. I know it's the first in the series, so I should, read the next one to truly make a decision. There was nothing super compelling about this read. I read this on and off as I did a big batch of cooking on Saturday. And if I'd set it aside, my brain wouldn't have been upset. But it was an easy read between making other things in the kitchen, so I just continued. This was predictable. It was annoying. It was flighty. I couldn't connect to Georgie at all. Something about this book was off for me. I don't think I'm continuing the series, to be honest. At best, this was a 2.5, 3-star read for me. I probably should have DNF'd it. Had I not been busy doing other things while in between reading, I would have DNF'd it. I was bored. And she didn't really solve the mystery so much as look into it. It was very obvious early on what the problem, who the villain was going to be. The one thing I did appreciate is it took a good half of the book for the dead body to show up. But before that, you knew he was going to end up dead. It wasn't a shock. So, it wasn't horrible. It wasn't great. It wasn't memorable. It was just a middle of the road, no-brainer, read it and forget it type book. So that's what I read last week. Coming up this week, I will read book number 3 in the Grilled Cheese Mystery Series, which is Cheddar Lathan Dead by Linda Riley. This was sent to me by the publisher Poison Pen Press. I am looking forward to it. I will continue reading Abigail Adams. Hopefully I will finish it this week. Depends on how much time I actually have to read with garden planning. I will also start Death on Windmill Way by Carrie Doyle. And I got to choose this month's book club book. And we chose Beneath a Scarlet Sky by Mark Sullivan. I have until the 17th of February to read it. So there is no sit down and read it all in one sitting type of pressure, which is good. I am continuing on in Middlemarch, which is enjoyable, which I knew it would be once I got started. Just a matter of getting through the prologue. And I am sure I will also start the other Carrie Doyle series I have. I have books 1 and 2 on my Kindle for the Trouble in Paradise trilogy. This is book 3. The publisher also sent me this. I think the first one is 2 to Tango. And I am looking forward to that. Should be a light week of reading, which is probably what I need. I have a lot of other things on my plate this week. So a light week of reading is very welcome. What did you read this week? Any stinkers? Any good ones? Let me know in the comments. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe. And I will talk to you next time.